Police-related headlines, phone calls, heated debates, topics that matter to you. Nothing is off limits. The only show hosted by police for society. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Policing Black and White. And now your host, TJ Block.
Welcome to Policing Black and White. I'm your host, TJ Block. I'm glad you're with us. Happy to hear that you're back again. That means we're doing something right here. I actually have a special guest with me today, Sergeant Jeff DeYoung. Jeff, say what's up to the listeners.
How's everybody doing?
A few shows ago, Jeff actually called in, and we had a great discussion about some heated topics, and I thought it'd be great to bring him back. So, without further ado, we're going to jump right into the headlines today because we have a lot to get to in a small amount of time. And today we're going to talk about DWIs. We're going to talk about DWIs in general, and we're also going to talk about this attorney, Warren Redlich. If you haven't heard, Mr. Redlich is kind of, some will say, letting people who are intoxicated maybe get through the system. It's definitely your opinion against ours, but I think that you'll be happy to hear that Mr. Redlich may have a problem getting this through the courts in the future. But let's talk about DWIs. Sarge, you were my sergeant for years. I mean, you probably had countless DWIs during your career, right?
Oh, yeah, especially earlier in my career.
Yep. And I mean, how many people would you say you've seen dead because of a drunk driver?
A lot more than I want to remember.
Yeah. And folks, we're not talking about one or two here. He had about a 23-year career. We're probably talking about 30 or 40 dead people because someone decided to get behind the wheel after drinking. And DWIs are a very, very important part of a patrolman's responsibility. It gets the people that shouldn't be driving off the street. And according to Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MAD as everyone knows them, 300,000 people drive drunk every day, and only 4,000 are arrested. That's a problem. It doesn't mean that police aren't doing our job. It just means that we don't have the resources to effectively arrest the people that need to be arrested. Let's not make believe this is a problem from the government, trying to make money like speeding tickets. We get that. This is a much more serious issue. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, it's a big difference between a speeding ticket issue and someone who's been driving drunk. That's a very, very serious charge, wouldn't you say?
It's probably one of the most serious. The problem with DWI is there's a little catch-22. You have people that commit DWIs that have spotless records, no history of any violence whatsoever, but they chose to go out and drink and drive. What those same people that are good people don't realize is when they're behind the wheel of a car, impaired, vehicle turned into a weapon.
Yeah, it's like this. It's like holding a loaded gun.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
But when they wake up the next morning, in their normal surroundings, and they're sitting there thinking, well, I wasn't that bad. And what they don't understand is it doesn't take much. Look at texting and driving. That's inattention.
Yeah.
When you're impaired by anything, your attention span diminishes.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why DWI has to be taken seriously.
Hey, you've seen The Wolf of Wall Street? I just thought of it. You remember in his head, he thought he got home perfectly, and he wakes up.
You talking about flying that helicopter? Or
yeah. I think it was a Lamborghini.
Yeah.
He thought he got home perfectly, but he hit everything in his path.
Yep.
That's you are not thinking clearly, and that's what the word impaired means. You are not thinking clearly.
And I think what we also have to understand is, it was always, and still today, when you hear DWI, people think alcohol. But DWI is also to include all impairing substances.
That's right.
And I will say this. You talk about time and resource. For the most part, DWI still today is for alcohol. We usually have it as if we have more reason to believe, but you're talking about then you have to go to the hospital and take blood, and it's a lot lengthier process, more costly. And so, again, just for clarification, even though it applies to all substances, for the most part, it's still used mainly for alcohol.
Oh, absolutely. And the reason why it is mainly used for alcohol is it comes down to training. A lot of officers aren't trained to know what to look for, say if someone's high on oxycodone or if someone is on Valium or Xanax. They don't know what to look for. So if they don't smell alcohol, but there is some type of an impairment, a lot of times they'll just call someone to pick them up.
Shit, I don't know if you remember, but I think you were on the squad when we had a situation with Ambien.
Yes.
And you can't sit there and draw the same line that someone chooses to drink and drive home from a bar and someone who's asleep in their bed and gets up sleepwalking and goes out and drives, but we have to have that in place. Doesn't mean we're always going to charge with that for an Ambien situation, but
right. And a lot of it is, especially with the Ambien situation, we can't use some of the tests that we know. We can't do a walk and turn test of somebody who can't stand. You know what I mean? So with Ambien, when we met that woman on the street, I think it was.
As I recall, wasn't she in a drive-through?
Yes. Okay. Yes. She
plowed through the drive-through.
That's right. It came out as a crash. She had plowed through the drive-through because she was on Ambien. The woman had no idea where she was, and she took Ambien later on when she was coherent. She took Ambien to go to sleep. She didn't take Ambien to get in a car. And it's come out that people are doing those type of things under those sleep medications. So my point is, there was no intent for her to drive under Ambien. It just, she got knocked on her ass from the medication. She got in a car. She didn't even realize it. Did we charge her? Probably, if I remember correctly, I don't even think we charged her. I think the damage was done.
Right.
And we let her go because she really had no intent of getting into a car.
Well, and in a situation like the Ambien, it goes back to, you have to have discretion and compassion. And someone like that, do they really deserve the hit that DWIs carry with insurance costs? What it does for your career or job that you may have or future employment. But, it's a big difference with someone who chooses to go out, chooses to drink, and chooses to drive home.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit here and say that I've never had too much to drink and driven home, even as a cop. Unfortunately, cops are a reflection of the society they serve, and I've said this, I believe, on your last show.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
And we take even a bigger risk. But if you have, say, a 16-year-old kid who, he goes to a party and he drives home and there's no accident, you stop him and he's impaired. I did it in my career. I would call parents.
Oh, sure.
I mean, a 16-year-old, I'm not saying it makes it right, but sometimes, and there were times when I charged a 16-year-old because, they impressed me as not understanding the situation, severity of it, maybe being a little bit pompous or whatever.
Yeah.
They're not getting the message.
Yeah.
But a kid that showed remorse and called parents and they were actively wanting to get down there and help, that gives us other options.
I am 100% in agreement with you. I will sit here and tell you I probably let more people go than I did arrest for DWI. And when I say let them go, folks, I'm not saying I let them get in their car and drive away. That never happened. When we say let them go, we say, we would call their parents or call a friend. If they had a history, for me, different story. If they already had a DWI charge, you're going down for it as long as, I can prove that you are intoxicated. But as a patrolman, you would get behind a vehicle, and a lot of people think that if you see a car, veering back and forth within a travel lane, that's enough to pull you over. Laws come out that that's not even enough anymore. If you're veering within your own travel lane and you're not exiting and entering your travel lane, that's not enough to pull you over.
Yeah, you have to cross the line.
You have to cross the line for many reasons.
Right.
Yeah, you have to cross the line. You have to, either cross the double yellow or cross the white line into another lane. And those are all tools that we use to pull someone over. A lot of times we would come up to a person on the street that would be stopped at a green light. You worked at night many, many years. You saw a car stopped at a green light, you knew what you were about to get into. That person's drunk, asleep against the wheel. Thank God they stopped at a safe place, because I've dealt with just as many where they didn't stop, they hit the gas, and they went into a building or some other car and killed somebody.
Well, I will say this. I have had someone impaired stopped at a green light, and the trickiest part is trying to reach in and put that car in park and cut it off. It presents a danger to the officer himself.
That's a great thing that you bring up. my first week in field training in the academy. You know, in the academy, it's a perfect world. You know what I mean? Like everything's set up perfect for you.
Right.
They tell you never reach in that car. Don't you dare reach in that car and turn it off. That's what they teach you in the academy. So I got my training coach next to me. The car's running. The person's asleep at the wheel. What am I supposed to do? Just wait there with my arms crossed until he wakes up and then politely ask him to shut the car off?
Or the car runs out of gas.
Or the car runs out of gas. No, you reach in there and you shut the damn car off. And that's a dangerous spot. You wake that person up who's drunk, who doesn't know what's going on. A lot of times their first instinct.
Okay, but let's make clarification too. That person's not drunk. They're fucked up.
Right.
And there is a big difference.
You're right. They're past the legal limit.
Well, not
right.
Well, but see, that's what people don't understand. 0.08, I think, is nationwide now. It has been for quite some time.
Yeah.
When I first became a cop, it was a 0.10 where I worked, and then was lowered to 0.08. What people do not understand is a 0.08 is legal impairment. We had PBTs when I was in the police department. You had them too.
Sure.
And they were hit at parties, especially with your civilian friends, because they'd be like, oh, I'm fine. You let them blow on it. And they were amazed at how high they were blowing.
Yeah.
So let's make that perfectly clear. 0.08, most people aren't drunk.
Yes.
They are impaired enough that the law deems they're not safe to operate a vehicle.
That's a good point.
But when you get to where something like stopped at a light and you pass out with your foot on the brake, or you've run over off the curb or hit a sign or, God forbid, hit another person or something like that, you're fucked up at that point. There's a big difference than legal impairment.
Right.
That's why a lot of people feel this sense of entitlement to drink and then drive because they feel like, I'm fine.
Well, that term now is appreciably impaired. That's the big word one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and that term was there when it was a 0.102.
Right.
It was something we had to memorize in our sermon and testimony in court.
That's right.
But again, we're talking about what the courts deem legal impairment, not what you or I and the other side of the coin is, I had a privileged licensee under the age of 21. Took them, charged them. I thought they were going to blow in mid-teens.
Yeah.
They blew a 0.04, which that was conviction for them because they're limited privilege. But I mean, some people can hold their booze, so to speak. And some people shouldn't be drinking ever, unless they're going to lock themselves in home. So but again, what we're talking about is legal impairment, and that's what a lot of people don't get. You're not what we understand as being drunk. Yeah, that's when you're in your teens.
Right.
So that's what people got to understand and get through their heads. Legal impairment and being drunk are two different things.
Do you think that, so it's basically what you're saying is, let's say you go out to a party one night, all right? You drink, you get stopped. You're a 0.08, but you're perfect. To you think you're perfect. You're driving, do you think that you should be charged for DWI? You blew a 0.08, but you know yourself that you're perfectly fine. Do you agree that you should have been charged, or do you think that the officer really should have used more discretion and looked into it rather than just read numbers off of a machine?
Well, let's not kid ourselves. I would like to think he would have used more discretion, but I don't set these limits. You don't. The police don't. The courts do. The experts do. And so we have to start somewhere.
That's right.
Am I going to like getting a 0.08 as opposed to a 16? At least I earned it. You know what I mean? But I mean, we have to draw the line because again, the reason the courts also did this, and let's not forget this. Like I said, a 0.04 can seem like someone 0.16.
Oh yeah.
Well, some 0.08s I've seen have been stumbling drunk.
Sure.
And they were dangerous.
Sure. And let's not forget, 0.08 is the standard in the courts, but we're taught, listen, you can be a 0.04 and be appreciably impaired. And, a lot goes into that. Body mass, what you've eaten that day, a lot goes into DWIs. A lot of people think that you can't arrest someone if they don't reach that 0.08. That is the standard set by most states. You can still arrest someone even if they're a 0.04 as long as you can prove that they are appreciably impaired. So 0.08.
Yeah, but good luck winning that in court.
Exactly. And that was the next thing we're going to go into is the courts. When police officers are on the street, everything that they do with DWIs, mostly for everything, is preparing for court. Okay? Right. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there are a lot of the reasons I let people get away with what they did DWI-wise was because I didn't want to deal with the courts. Because a lot of these judges and a lot of these attorneys, they do have loopholes and tactics that when a cop spends 8 hours on a DWI, and I'm not exaggerating, it takes anywhere from 4 to 8 hours on a DWI where I work to have an attorney find some ridiculous loophole to let him go. And it happened all the time. Rather than waste resources and spend that 8 hours, I would call the person, like you said, call a friend and let him go home. Okay? But on the street, we are always preparing for court, and that's the key here with DWIs. And that's what brings us to this checkpoint stuff. This attorney out of Florida, this Mr. Warren Redlich, what Warren Redlich is trying to say is that an officer does not have the right to even speak to the person during a checkpoint. A lot of what an officer does to raise reasonable suspicion and probable cause with the DWI arrest, there are so many tools that we use to establish probable cause. And before we even go into the checkpoints, let's talk about that a little bit. Because on TV, you see a guy, especially let's say on Cops or on all these other police shows, the guy brings out a little white tool, he puts it up to the driver's mouth, it shows a number, oh, you're drunk, handcuffs. Folks, that is not how it works. That couldn't be further from the truth. So there are many, many steps that go into a DWI arrest. Like I said, it's not just using that PBT that Jeff just mentioned, which isn't even admissible in court. So if we're behind you and we pull a car over and we think you may be intoxicated, there are several tools and steps that we can use to build our probable cause to make an arrest for DWI or get you down to the machine to at least blow for DWI. As soon as he pulls you over and he turns on those blue lights, he's watching how you pull over. He's watching how fast you pull over. He's watching if you pull over to the right side. He's seeing if you're staring back at us or if you're staring straight ahead. A lot goes into a traffic stop. The second we walk up to your window, is this criminal? Is this going to be DWI? Is this going to be a speeding ticket? We're building a case at the second we pull you over. First thing we do is ask for your license and registration. We'll watch to see how you get that license and registration. Do you fumble it when you go to the glove box? Do you hand us a Macy's card by accident? Sorry, how many times did somebody hand you the wrong thing when they were drunk? You ask for a license, they hand you God knows what.
No shit.
Yeah.
One of the funniest things I ever saw, it was funny because fortunately nothing happened. He actually asked me to hold his beer while he got his license out of the glove box.
Yeah.
That is no shit.
I mean, I believe it.
But the thing is, more things go into it. Are you repeating what's asked of you? I need your license registration. You need my what? I mean, simple instructions, do you know why I'm stopping you? Why you stop me? But your ability to understand instructions.
That's exactly right.
And like you said, all these other things, is it normal behavior? It's normal to be nervous.
Yeah.
Hell, I got stopped by a state trooper and got a fucking ticket 8 months ago.
Yeah.
And scared the shit out of me.
Of course. Yeah.
But
they call it the pucker effect. It never goes away.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with being nervous. That's why a lot of these tests, too, after many years of being a cop, I learned which test and which observations I thought were truly in support of someone being impaired, or was it just nerves?
Sure. Yeah, so we're watching to see if you can follow instruction. That's the perfect way to put it. And a lot of times we'll talk to you, we'll ask you your name, where you're going. We don't really care what you're saying so much a lot of the times. We're smelling what's on your breath a lot of the times. We want you to get you talking so we can smell. Now remember, alcohol in itself doesn't have a scent. An alcoholic beverage such as beer, that has a scent. And I've lost cases in court because I used the word alcohol and not the word alcoholic beverage. Have you ever heard that before?
No, and I think it's total horseshit.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Well, the bottom line is it's the sweetness that you're smelling on the breath from alcohol.
Exactly right.
Now, it doesn't matter if it's beer, wine, whiskey, whatever. Yeah. Although vodka doesn't have the strongest scent. Yeah. No two viewers. But anyway, seriously, or your listeners, right? But I never understood that when I was never used on me in court.
Oh, I lost a case.
I'm not trying to sidetrack, but what you just said, that's because that was the interpretation of law given that judge, that DA, and that defense attorney.
Exactly.
And that's where not just DWIs, but especially DWIs, interpretation of law, it varies courtroom to courtroom,
Sure.
Who's presiding, who's defending, who's prosecuting. So, yeah, you very easily could have lost something like that, and I never even heard that argument presented against me because no one else interpreted the law that way.
Oh, you remember, we had an attorney called Turn 'em Loose. I'm not going to say his name, but we had a judge that we hated to go before because his name was Turn 'em Loose and then his name. Because he just turned everyone loose because let's not forget, they're voted there. The judges are voted in. So how many votes are they going to get if they keep convicting people? A little bit of a flaw in our system, I think, if you ask me. Anyway, so we go back to, smelling the breath on someone. If and we'll look at your eyes or your eyes bloodshot. Because remember, we're not just looking for alcohol anymore in this day and age. We're looking for a lot of other things. Mainly alcohol, though, because that's what we're trained to look for. If we suspect that you may be impaired, we'll ask you to exit the vehicle. Now keep in mind, folks, once we do a traffic stop, we can ask you to get in and out of the car as many times as we need to, as long as it's reasonable. Reasonable is a big part of being a police officer. When we ask you to exit the car, we're watching to see if you need to hold on to something to get out of the car. We're looking to see how fast you can do it. Are you delaying it? A lot of times, if somebody's drunk, they'll go, wait, why? They'll try to delay it. They think that they'll win the fight and not have to get out of the car because they know what's coming next if they've been through it. So once we do that, we ask them to walk to the back of the car. Again, we're watching to see how you walk. Are you stumbling? Are you holding on to the car? Then once we get you back to the car, after we go through the safety measures, of frisking you and searching you and making sure you don't have anything that could hurt us, then we will start what's called standardized field sobriety tests. There are a couple of them, but there are three major ones that almost all departments use. One is an nystagmus test, one is the one-leg stand test, and one is the walk and turn test. Okay, and those are the three that we are going to focus on right now. And I'm going to try to explain these, and I'm going to try as hell to be entertaining. Maybe it's a little dry, but I feel like you really need to understand this because it is not as easy as an officer looking at someone and saying, you're drunk, you're going to jail. That's just not how it works. So we're going to start with the walk and turn test, which, Sarge, I'm sure you're very familiar with the walk and turn test. People have probably seen it on TV too. The walk and turn test, if I showed you the card about the details that we must explain to someone, I think the card, it's like an index card, it takes up about 4 cards. That's how many steps there are to this simple walk and turn test. The first thing that we make sure that they do is stand with their hands at their side. We're saying that for many reasons. One, for protection. We don't want people moving around erratically. And 2, can you stand there with your arms at your side? Or are you staggering because you're impaired? We will explain the instructions to you, the walk and turn test. We will even show you how to do the test. And we'll ask you, did you understand every aspect to this test? And if you say no, we will repeat it again and again until you understand the test and you can't say later on, oh, I didn't understand. So we do all that to avoid the statement, oh, I didn't get it.
Well, and one of the things I practiced, and we didn't have as formal a training on these tests like you did when you were in academy. It was taught to you by your training coach. But one of the things I learned quickly was before I asked them to do it, I explained it, demonstrated, asked if there were any questions. If they said no, I'd say, okay, once I ask you to begin, you can't ask me any other question.
That's right.
And I don't know if that's being...
Yes, it is.
Good.
Yes.
Because, like you said, these are very basic, simple instructions, and if they can't do it without asking, okay, now what do you want me to do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And one thing I want to throw out here real quick, a lot of people can't understand how you can determine someone's impaired, especially with alcohol so quickly. I challenge listeners to go to a party that's been cranked up for about 4 hours.
Yeah.
And you get there 4 hours into it and you hadn't had a drop to drink. You'll spot every drunk son of a bitch in the room real quick.
Absolutely.
Because
it's
you're
not hard.
It's not.
It's really not
because
hard.
of slurred speech, watery eyes, loud, obnoxious, hitting on your girlfriend.
Yeah.
That's another story.
Yeah. But like we said before, we got to prepare for that day in court. And that's what we're doing. And we're it's almost like being in a college course. We're taking notes. The whole time we're on that traffic stop, we're taking notes on what you're doing. And when it comes to the walk and turn test, we tell you exactly how many steps to take. We tell you exactly the way we want you to turn around, and we tell you exactly how many steps we want you to take back, all while touching heel to toe. There's other details in there, but I'm just giving you the brief description of it. I can't tell you how many people take 3 steps, turn around, say, okay, I'm done, I did good, or their hands are swaying from side to side. They take 15 steps. You got to remind them to turn around. They're halfway down the block at that point. That's just one of the tools. The next one is the one-leg stand test. There's not a lot of details to this. It's very similar. You explain exactly what you want. One foot comes off the ground. You even get to choose which foot. You keep it off the ground. There's a duration that we want you to do it. And if you can do it, great. If not, we'll count how many times you put your foot down. Listen, folks, if you put your foot down once because you lose your balance, not everyone has great balance. We get that. If you're putting it down...
Especially when you're nervous.
Exactly, especially when you're nervous. You're putting it down 8 or 9 times during a 30-second span. Okay, that's a clue.
Or as opposed to putting your foot down so fearful that you fall flat on your ass.
Which we've seen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we've had to hold people up, and I had to bring someone to a hospital who just fell right on the back of his head. And the third one, my favorite, and I think the most telling one, is what's called the gaze nystagmus test. There isn't a human alive that can control their nystagmus. The human eye has a certain movement that you cannot control.
Well, and I'm not trying to sound like a dinosaur, but it's the truth. We didn't get the formal training like you did in the academy.
Sure.
But the gaze nystagmus was the one that I banked on.
Yep.
Because it was the most telling, because it's very simple. My interpretation is the eye's ability to track.
That's right.
And when you're impaired, that tracking of the eye is not a fluid motion. It flutters.
Yep.
Because it has a hard time tracking.
Yep.
And it got to where people are good at it. You could almost judge what they were going to blow by what degree the eye started to flutter.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, of all the tests, I think that's one of the better, because you can take out all the nervousness. That's something you can't control. Stress has no effect on it, just impairment.
Yep. And a lot of people, when, again, on TV, or when you see a cop on the side of the road and they're holding their finger out of their flashlight and they're making somebody watch their, a focal point. A lot of people think, and even I thought this before I became a cop, was, can he just simply follow that light? If that's what we're checking, can his eyes track that light? That's not what we're really checking. We're checking how the eye responds while it's moving. It's almost like we're talking about like doctor stuff here. And
that's what I'm saying. It's the most scientific of all the tests. And it's, like I said, when that eye starts to flutter, it's not tracking smoothly. That's what we're looking for as far as, are you impaired or not?
Yep. And again, we give very specific instructions before we start this test. And the first is called, there's 6 steps to the nystagmus test that we must do. And it's called standardized field sobriety test because it is standardized. We have to follow a certain way of doing it. And the first one is called the relaxed nystagmus. And it simply is you stare at an item and we watch your eye and we see, is your eye doing any movement? Because when you're focused on something, your eye may have a little movement, but for the most part, it should remain still. It shouldn't be, what's the word you used before?
Flutter.
Flutter is the perfect word. Your eye shouldn't be you're fluttering. And we're not talking about your eyelids, folks, here. We're talking about your actual eyeball fluttering. So the first one is the relaxed one. We just simply hold out a focal point. We keep it still, and we just make you focus on it for a couple seconds. The second one is called equal tracking. We'll move the focal point around a couple times side to side, again, to see if there's any jitters in your eye. Third one, going through them real quick here, smooth pursuit. We move it side to side, basically, as far as the eye can reach to each side. And we see if there's any fluttering within those movements. And then we hold our focal point out as far as the eye can see, and we hold it there, and we see if there's any fluttering. And then we also have one, it's called onset prior to 45 degrees, where we bring your eye's focal point out about halfway to your total field of vision, about halfway. Again, we're seeing if there's any shuddering going on. And then the final one is the vertical one when we move up and down. So folks, it is not as simple as looking at somebody and bringing out a little tool and saying you're drunk. There is a lot to it. And when you look at an officer's notes from a DWI, mine were normally around 8 pages long.
Okay, but I want to interject something real quick.
Sure.
If the right officer is doing it the right way.
Right. Well, let me tell you, I sitting in a courtroom once, and there was a certain officer on my squad. This was before I came to you. There was a certain officer on my squad that just loved DWIs. And folks, you'll know every squad usually has people that do certain things that they like to do. There are a lot of cops out there that love to do DWIs, and there are a lot of cops out there that hate to do them. And it's just like drugs. A lot of cops hated working drugs, but everyone found their niche. And when you found your niche, you got really good at it. I was lucky enough to have somebody on my squad that was unbelievable with DWIs. He taught me a lot. I remember sitting in a courtroom and watching this video, and it was so obvious this guy was drunk that they were showing on the video during his court case. He couldn't follow instructions. He was staggering. The officer said his nystagmus was out of control. Then we get to the walk and turn test. Okay? And again, it's an ability to follow instruction. That is the main part of all of these tests except for the nystagmus. The officer explains it, shows him hit twice because he didn't understand it. The suspect does the test but walks backwards instead of forwards. He literally walks backwards 9 steps and then walks. He totally did it wrong, but he did it. The judge pauses for about 5 seconds and said, well, if he can do it backwards, he probably could have done it forwards. Not guilty. Just like that. I watched it just like that. That's what we're up against, folks. And that's why when we're out there, we have to take such detailed notes and we have to go by these tests because when it comes to the day in court, we got to be able to prove we're the ones under the spotlight, not you on that court day. You agree with that?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's not just with DWIs. It's everything. It's law enforcement.
It's everything. But wouldn't you say you were most nervous about DWI cases when it came to court? Was that you or no?
Oh, by far.
Yeah.
Because I knew I could lose them, and especially when I was younger, I took pride in convictions.
Right.
But that wore off, and what really got to me was, wait a minute. Yeah, I'm losing DWIs, and if someone blew a .08 for me, I really didn't feel good about charging DWI.
Right.
But if they blew .08, it wasn't like I said, I'm going to dismiss it.
Yeah.
But most of my DWIs were in the mid to upper teens or higher.
Right.
And for them to be found not guilty showed me that for whatever reason, political reasons, whatever, financial gain, let's not get into all that.
Yeah, whole other show.
That was that was
the standard.
Standard. And you're talking about somebody when they're blowing that high, the chances of them hurting someone are a lot worse than someone who blows .08.
Right.
And what they learn from that is, hey, I got out of one.
Yeah. No, you're right. What does that teach them?
Right.
That's exactly.
But on another thing, and I hope I'm not getting ahead of herself, but I want to say this real quick.
You're not smart enough. Go ahead.
When he shipped from you, squeeze your ears together. But one of the things I want to say is DWI is a serious offense, and the fallout from someone drunk driving, it can be deadly. Mm-hmm. We know that. Mm-hmm. But what I want to interject real quick is the penalties that come from DWI and what it does for you for employment, not just your current employment, future employment, what it does for you on insurance.
Oh, yeah.
And all these other things is worse than a lot of felonies.
The average DWI costs about $10,000 when all said and done. Yep.
And you don't find that unless you're maintaining a dwelling to cook crack.
Yeah.
But, I mean, what I don't like is I think someone should serve their time for their conviction. Usually, base rule of thumb, 1 year limited privilege for a first-time DWI. Yeah. What I don't agree with, an employer terminating someone for DWI, unless they're driving
their equipment.
Yeah, they're on duty or they're working for the company.
Sure.
But if it's something they've done when they are not working, I don't agree with the fallout that comes to people in their careers. And future employment.
See, I disagree with you there because I think, what if it was an assault? If the assault happened at work or outside of work, what does that matter? That's a deflection on you and your character. So
but an assault doesn't carry the same penalty as a DWI when it comes to employment. That's my point.
But are you talking about if an employer, are you talking about conviction wise, or are you talking about if somebody, like if an employer found out you got arrested for DWI and that employer just fires him right there.
Even if it's after conviction.
Okay.
I don't give a fuck.
Okay.
I mean, this is something that someone did, and, we live in a country that, we're supposed to be able to pay penance and be able to move on.
Yeah.
And DWI has this, I'm not knocking bad, I was raised at an earlier time when the drinking age was 18 in high school.
You're a mad guy. So, yeah.
But one of the things MAD did was get alcohol age out of high school, which I agree with.
Right.
They've done a lot. But I think MAD has also sometimes pushed issues regarding DWIs and helped lobby for some penalties and things that are pretty much in excess, in my opinion.
See, I do agree with you there.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. Guy gets convicted of shoplifting, does community service. It can be removed from his record if he's a first-timer.
Right.
You don't have that option in DWI.
Right.
I think, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we turn a blind eye to DWI, but I'm just saying, these people who are convicted should be able to serve their year or whatever, and after 3 years, insurance points gone, whatever it is, 4 years. But I don't think employment should come into play unless it's something more negligent. If they hurt somebody, that's one thing. But if it's a standard DWI, like most we see, someone is not driving good, cop stops them, does their test, they blow high enough, boom, they're convicted in court. I don't agree with that, especially for a first-time DWI.
Well, let's talk about reasonableness a little bit, and we don't want to get way off topic here, but corporate America is very different right now than it used to be. And the way that I look at it is this. If you have to drive a lot in your job and you got a DWI, regardless if you're working or not, and you got a DWI and a big part of your job is driving, I think it should reflect. And I'm not saying you should be fired for it, but maybe, suspended, or you can't drive a truck until you pass whatever you need to pass or do your time or however that works.
But most of these employers don't have that. It's a flat out.
And that's what
you're fired.
And that's what I was going to say. In this day and age, it's always an extreme. It's always one or the other.
And a lot of it boils down to insurance and liability. That's why companies do this now.
Oh, of course. Of course. You can't, if a guy has a DWI and he has to drive for a living, and he has to drive for that company, there's no way in hell he's getting hired, because once the insurance finds out that somebody has a DWI, they'll either be dropped or they'll go up $5,000 a year. So yeah, there's a lot of aspects to that, and we can probably argue it until nightfall. But I think that if you receive a DWI, whether it's at work or not, I think that is a reflection of your character, and I think that should weigh on whether you should be employed there or not. And I know you feel differently.
I'm not saying it can't be taken into consideration. I'm just saying, no, you can't have a blanket policy.
Right.
I mean,
I agree with that.
I mean, yeah. We're not perfect.
Yeah.
Including cops.
I'm kind of perfect.
Well, only in your mind. But, we all can make mistakes. And that's what I was saying earlier. DWI, first-time DWIers, they're not criminals. They're not necessarily bad people. They fucked up. Yeah, they're not a fuck-up.
Right, yeah. And a lot of people... DWI the first time is a misdemeanor too. Let's not.
Right.
Let's not.
But I'm saying that same misdemeanor holds more penalty.
So we spent a lot of time on that, folks. Now you know what goes into a DWI. It is a lot. Let's look at this guy, this attorney, and what he's doing. What he's saying is for any road checkpoint, you can hold up a piece of paper that has your information on it, your license and your registration and your insurance information, he says, just to be safe. Hold up that piece of paper to the window at the checkpoint and you should be allowed through. That's what this guy, attorney, is saying.
Okay, well, again, are we talking about a license checkpoint or a DWI checkpoint?
I am glad you asked that. Thank you, Sarge. There is a big difference, folks, between... That sounded rehearsed. I swear that wasn't rehearsed out there. That sounded pretty good. There is a big difference between a DWI checkpoint and a vehicle regulatory checkpoint, meaning vehicle equipment, registration, stuff like that. Those are two different checkpoints. And you're not allowed to run them at the same time either. So if you're going to do a vehicle, regulatory inspection, driver's license status, stuff like that, You can go out there and do it, and there's not much, there's no paperwork actually that needs to be filed for the most part, unless your department requires more, and that does happen sometimes. But for a DWI, a lot of paperwork for a checkpoint, a lot of paperwork needs to be filed that says the location, that gives you a pattern. Are you going to stop every car? Are you going to stop every third car? Who's in charge of it? How long it's running? Where it's running? I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. You even have to announce, right? Don't you have to announce that there's actually going to be one too?
To the media.
Yeah, to the media. You actually have to announce that there's going to be one to the media. So it's not like this secret, tactical force out there that's trying to get drinking and driving, although that is the goal. We're trying to keep the streets safe. That is the bottom line. And if somebody holds up a piece of paper and we can't talk to them, how are we supposed to check if they are drunk or not? And that's where the problem lies. Listen, if you pull up to a checkpoint and they're doing vehicle regulatory checkpoint, not DWI, and you hold up those items to the window, as an officer, I might say, man, he's prepared. Good deal. See you later. You know what I mean? The part that I don't like is I need to be able to touch that license, number one, because a lot of states spend a lot of money so licenses can't be replicated. There's a lot of texture to a license.
What happens when you get first time DWI? What happens?
Exactly. That's an old secret.
Yeah.
Law enforcement knows. They staple your license to the ticket, and if we feel that license and there's a staple holes in it, sometimes that would be a clue to us. Listen, you can't use that in court, but that was just one clue. Just because you can't use it in court doesn't mean that we're not allowed to use it. But if we felt that there were staple holes in a license, we said, okay, this guy was convicted of DWI. Maybe I should look into this a little further, And registration. How do I know looking through a window? That could be a completely replicated, made up registration. I need to hold this stuff.
Not only that, a lot of people do very well drunk sitting at the bar. When they have to get up and walk is when they realize they're fucked up.
Exactly.
So we need to be able to, talk, or some people look really sober at the bar to start talking to them. Well, that's why we need to have that interaction. You can't do that through a closed window.
Now, the law says that you must produce, at a checkpoint, you must produce. That's the word it uses. Produce your license and registration. Now, what this attorney is saying, putting it up to the window, is producing it. That's enough. And what we're arguing is, no, that is not producing it. Producing it is giving it to us so we can look at it and say, okay, this is real, this is you, move on.
But again, you and I are talking about maybe two different things when I just said we need to be able to talk and smell and all that for a DWI checkpoint.
Yeah.
Again, that's what I'm getting at is, I'm not clear if this guy, this attorney, is saying it applies to DWI checkpoint or just
both. He's saying it applies to both. He said you should never have to roll down your window no matter what.
Well, I'm wondering how he's going to feel when someone he loves gets killed because someone used his little trick, drove through the checkpoint, drunk as shit, but because they didn't have to have the proper interaction with an officer to build probable cause, they get killed by that same drunk down the road, someone he loves. That's why we have these things.
Or how about this? The guy's not even drunk. And he tries to produce that, and the cops say, what the hell was that? The guy just went through the checkpoint, and they get into a car chase, and the guy ends up hitting a tree because he's listening to this stupid attorney's information.
Yeah, I mean, most states, my understanding, I know our state is one of them, it is implied consent when it comes to DWI. What that means is that license is a privilege. And one of the privileges, one of the right set privileges, your understanding, it's implied you have to give consent.
That's right.
For a DWI investigation.
Folks, you sign that. When you take your license, you sign saying, I understand that I am...
I'm subject to...
Thank you. When you sign for your license, you are signing saying, I understand that I am subject to certain tests. You sign that. Take a look at the paperwork. I doubt you have it, but take a look at it. It is an implied consent, like Jeff just said, and it is a privilege to be on the road. It is a privilege. It is not something that is a given. It is a privilege. That's why you have to test for it. Did you know that there's slips that police officers can fill out that if we feel like someone, either because of age, vision, something else, we can fill out a slip and take their license right from them, or at least put them in front of a panel that addresses the situation? It is a privilege to drive. And part of that privilege is understanding that you may be stopped at a checkpoint and you may be asked to, you may be asked certain questions. Now, let's not forget, folks, if you're not drunk, why the fuck do you care? That's the bottom line. If you're doing the right thing, who gives a fuck if you're holding your stuff out the window or not? This attorney, to me, is saying it's okay to drive drunk and here's how you beat it. And it's just like you said, wait until somebody kills his family member. How's he going to feel?
And the other thing is, too, your right to privacy lessens considerably when you get on the road in a vehicle.
Yeah, you don't own that road.
You don't own that road.
Yeah.
It's not like, and look at it even further, if you sit home and get drunk as fuck at your house, who you hurting?
Right, exactly.
But if you get behind the wheel of a car impaired, legally impaired, which is not even drunk as fuck, but, who could you hurt then?
Right.
And that's why, we have to have the right to stop motorists when we feel they're impaired, or have checkpoints checking randomly to see who's getting by that we might have missed. And that's why we have these checkpoints. Like you said before, we can't be everywhere. We don't have the resources. When we come up with these DWI checkpoints, it's usually multi-jurisdiction.
Oh, yeah.
And, you've seen it, I've seen it.
Yeah.
Sometimes that state's highway patrol, the local county, and the whatever city, municipality, all get involved in it. And it's a big to-do because we're trying to send a message. Okay, we know alike, get away, not tonight.
Right.
And you need to understand that this night can happen again. You don't know when it's going to happen.
We see the results. Police officers see the results of DWI. Now that I'm resigned, I hope I never have to pull a 5-year-old out of the back seat of a car who's dead because somebody decided to take a drink or a couple shots and thought he can make it home. You've seen dead children from DWIs, I'm sure, in your career. I've seen people get on the wrong way on the highway and create an absolute catastrophe. This is all from drinking and driving. And this guy is trying to develop a way to beat the system, is trying to develop a way to beat the people that are trying to help society. Folks, we don't get money if we get a DWI arrest. You know what we get with the DWI arrest? A shitload of paperwork. That's what we get with it. Ask most officers out there, they will tell you they hate DWIs. They hate doing them because the paperwork, the amount of hours, the amount of time spent in court, they don't like doing DWIs, but we know we have to do them to keep our streets safe.
I think we got to take one step further. Yes, the reason we don't like doing them is because we don't want to go through all the effort you just described just to have a 50-50 shot of conviction in court.
That's what I mean. Yeah, of course.
We're willing to do that.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. That's a good point. If I knew that it would be treated fairly in court, I would do as many DWIs as I possibly can. If I knew it would get a fair shot in court. But they don't get a fair shot in court. A lot of times I will say, if the person's polite, like you and I have said, I will take their keys, I will call their mom or dad if they're young, or a friend if they're older, and say, get down here, this guy needs a ride home. He's home safe, I'm out working the street, preventing something else. It's a win-win situation. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that happens a lot. Not as much as it used to, but it happens a lot. Flashing up your stuff through the window to get through a checkpoint. What if we were on a search warrant or a warrant, and we have that search warrant, and we just flash it real quick instead of serving the warrant? We just say, you know what? We flash it. It's here. Take our word for it. It's here. And we flash it and put it in our pocket and keep going and arrest the person. How much trouble would we be in if we did that?
By law, when you serve a search warrant, even if there's no one there, you have to read the search warrant
out loud
to an empty fucking house. But that's why we do it.
And that's real, folks. Folks, if we're doing a search warrant and nobody's home, we literally stand there and read it anyway. And we do it. It's not... Go ahead.
Another thing I want to point out too, these license checkpoints, not the DWI, but the license registration type thing. A lot of times those things are actually called because we're trying to develop suspect information on a burglary pattern or homicide or whatever. Sometimes these things are disguised as I don't want to say disguised. That sounds like we're hiding something.
No, it is.
Yeah, actually, we're hiding from the bad guys.
Yeah.
We're hiding from the bad guys. Fact, this looks like a license check, but what we're really trying to do is, maybe we're looking for someone who's wanted for some pretty intense shit.
Right.
Or maybe as we're doing this, hey, we had some burglaries in the area. You see anything on a given day, whatever.
Yeah.
We can also throw that into the equation while checking license and registration. We used to do that all the time. It was a simple license registration check, and we were in a high crime area.
Yeah.
We'd talk about the trends before we started, and then we'd say, all right, here's the questions we need to ask in addition to getting license and registration. And you know what? The people lived in those neighborhoods that weren't drunk, that had a righteous license, they loved it.
They loved
exactly.
it. They love the people that have nothing to hide. Love when police are in the neighborhood. They do. We do. If there's an area with a lot of crime, just like you said, just the fact that we have a car there with blue lights is all we're trying to achieve. A lot of times, I'll say it right now. I've been told, set up a checkpoint. Try not to write any tickets unless you have to. Just be out there so people can see you're out there. Oh, that's what a lot of checkpoints are. Highway patrol, they got their own kind of deal, and there's a big difference to me between a highway patrolman and a city officer.
Highway patrolman does not learn the diplomacy of going into a man's house while he's watching the football game in front of his wife and kids and placing them under arrest.
That's right.
Because again, they're working the highways, and again, as we already said, you have less privilege on the open road, and that's where people really need to understand this whole thing.
So once you're at that checkpoint, I just want everyone to understand, when you're going through, if you have nothing to hide, we talk to you, we check your license for both DWI and for both vehicle regulatory inspection stuff. If you're good to go, it's a friendly thank you, ma'am, drive safely. We don't have any reasonable suspicion to stop you there. By law, we can't keep you there for any longer than asking those questions. Now, if we do find something, a smell or something ain't adding up, we have enough reasonable suspicion to turn it into a traffic stop. So folks, stopping at a checkpoint, that is not a traffic stop. It is not a traffic stop until we ask you or direct you or give you a command to pull over or step out or give you some type of command. A lot of people say, I was stopped by the police today. No, that's not what happened. You went through a checkpoint, and these checkpoints are all done for the right reason. I want to give out some stats because this gentleman, this attorney, 239 children were killed from drunk drivers in 2012. Half were actually in the vehicle of the drunk driver. And last year, 29.1 million people admitted to driving drunk. This guy is trying to help these people? I don't get it. I don't get it. Do you?
Well, unfortunately, I do get his motivation.
Money.
Exactly. He's going to get all these clients because, look at this crusader.
I do want to say one thing. None of this has reached the court yet. He's branding all this. He's got his website. He's got his little paper things that he's done. But I wonder if it's reached the courts yet.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, as a cop, seeing what he's doing, there's a question mark in my mind. Mm-hmm. Well, if I were still a cop, but I mean, if I were to do a license checkpoint now as a supervisor in charge and someone rolled up with one of these designs this guy has, that's a good question. I mean,
what do you do?
Well, and again,
what would you do? I'll stick you out. What would you do as a take the supervisor aspect out of it.
Okay.
You're just a cop.
If I was a cop at a checkpoint, somebody rolled through like that, if they produced license registration to where I could make it out as best I could, but refused to lower the window.
Now, are we doing a DWI checkpoint, or are we doing the
again? What the fuck is the difference in some ways? I mean, there is a difference, but still, even like you said...
Let's say you were doing a DWI one.
If I was doing DWI checkpoint...
And somebody rolled up...
If they rolled up like that, and as I'm looking at it, I'd be looking at their eyes too. Do I see gauge nystagmus? Do I see watery eyes?
What if they're trained not to look at you? They just hold it just like that. You can't get anything on them except that piece of paper. What do? You're
going to have to let them go. Unless the courts come out with a ruling.
I'll tell you one, not to interrupt you, I'm not letting them go.
What are you going to do?
I'm going to say, I need you to produce your license and registration. You are not producing it to me. You are putting it up to the window. That's great. I don't even know if that's real. That could be a photocopy of somebody else. I want that license. I need to be able to hold it intangible and make sure it's real. you know.
And they refuse.
And if they refuse to give it to me, I'm taking them out of the car at that point. At that point, it's a traffic stop.
Well, but again, we shouldn't even have to be having this debate.
I agree.
It should be, and that's where the courts fail, or have in the past. Hopefully the courts are going to act on this quickly and come out and say, no, that is not good enough.
Yeah.
The reason these things are designed is so we can make sure you're producing valid credentials, IDs. The other reason is because we want to be able to talk to you and smell what's emitting from that vehicle, because that is one of the biggest. We talked about it before, the smell of an alcoholic beverage or whatever you're told to play on words.
Yeah.
That's something that we've always, that's one of the tools. That's why we have to have the window down and be able to talk. And is there speech slurred? All these things. It should be a no-brainer. And I'm just saying right now, if I was on the street, unless I had more, free to go. And then I'll contact the, department attorney, and get a better ruling on it.
Real quick, before we wrap up, I just want to make it very clear that if this was something about like speeding tickets, and I understand speed kills, or if this was about legalizing radar detectors, just stuff like that, hey, by all means, have at it. But when I've seen what DWI can do to a vehicle or to the human body, I will fight this until the end. Meaning, if this reaches the courts and actually goes through, folks, I'm going to ask a lot of you to start petitioning, to writing into your congressman, to do whatever it takes to make sure that this doesn't fly. DWI is not something to be messed with.
What is the goal here for this guy? I mean, and I would urge, I know you have listeners that are attorneys themselves. Sure. I'd urge any attorney that's listening to this broadcast, if he wants to dig a little bit deeper, help us out here. Where does this guy stand?
That's true. That's true. We've had a lot of attorneys write in. We've talked to some on here. A big fan base, for some reason, is attorneys out there for us.
Well, because,
that's a good point.
Not all attorneys are scum suckers.
Right, just like cops.
Yeah. No, cops are good people. But seriously, I mean, and I would urge any attorney that's listening to this, again, helps out here, see what their interpretation of it is, and, help us prove that not all attorneys are of the same mindset.
Yeah, real quick. I know I have a funny story. Do you have a pretty good DWI funny story that you'd be willing to tell?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, I should say, I'm going to limit you at 10. It's funny DWI stories today. Give me a good one. Give me a real good one.
Well, this is really more about the trainee I had, who will remain nameless.
Sure.
But we had just cleared the jail, which was in the downtown area, and we were getting back on main artery, go back in the area we worked, and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. Here comes a Jaguar going the wrong way on the road.
Oh, jeez.
We go to stop it, and I'm riding, passenger, Ricky's driving.
Yeah.
Get out of the car, go walking up, I'll see something moving in my peripheral. He's gotten out and left the car and drive. And it's like, don't brake! So he hops in the car, hits the brake, stops just inches of hitting the Jaguar. And it probably wouldn't have done much damage, but it is a Jag.
Oh, man.
Very attractive female driving the car, wearing short shorts.
Yes.
And very drunk. So we take her in, we're going to process her, and at the time, you had to take your duty weapon and lock it in a lockbox before you proceed with the DWI investigation.
Okay.
And like I always told all my trainees, search them again just to make sure you didn't miss something.
Be clear, folks. He's talking about when you're at the jail, too, not when you're out in the field.
Right. Well, you search them once before you put them in the car,
right,
and because you're removing your sidearm, it's a good practice to search them again in case you missed a weapon.
Exactly.
She is wearing a halter and short shorts and had legs that went on forever. Very attractive woman.
Huh, you don't remember much about this woman, do you?
So he asked her to stand up again, put her hands against the wall. She goes, why? He says, I'm going to search you again. She goes, you already did. I was like, man, please do what he says. Puts her hands up on the wall, and he's nervous. This is his first week of field training. Yeah. And he's used to the systematic pat down. Uh-huh. So he does arms around the waist, and he's like, ma'am, I'm using the backside of my hand to check around your breast area, which was. Yeah. And just out of habit, he started spanking down the entire length of her bare legs. And when he's getting ready to start on the second one, she stopped. What the fuck are you doing? on. And he starts convulsing. He's so embarrassed realizing what he'd just done. I had to take over from there. He was dead in the water. But true story. Searched the entire length of her day.
Oh, that's hysterical. You know, I have a funny story. I have a couple. One, you were actually there, and my father decided to do a ride along with me one day. Remember, it's just pouring rain out one day. There was an accident, and I said, my father was with me. I'm like, all right, let me show you what an accident looks like. I get there. Somebody walks up to me, it may even been you, and go, the guy's drunk. And of course, like every other cop, oh fuck, I don't want a DWI, damn it, you know? So I get the guy out of the car, and he's wobbly. I can tell he's already drunk, but like we talked about, we're going to go through all the tests to make sure when our day comes in court, we cover everything we need to. You were there as a sergeant. It was raining. You were wearing this ridiculously yellow thing on your hat that made you look like a condom. And I kept telling my dad, look at this. Look at my supervisor. He looks like the Trojan man over there. I'm laughing at you.
Didn't you get pneumonia 2 days later?
Yeah. So I pull the guy out. I give him all the instructions. Sir, this is the one leg stand, this is how you do it, everything. And at the end, you know, you always say, okay, sir, do you understand? He said, yes, I understand. I said, is there any reason why you can't do any of these tests? Yes, sir, there is. Why, sir? Because I'm very drunk. That's all I needed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. No need to do a test. You're back in the car. But yeah, you know, we joke around it, but DWI is serious. I hope this is just a viral thing on the internet. I really hope it doesn't go much further than it has. But I want to tell the listeners out there, please don't try this. You know, there's going to be officers out there that have no idea that this is even going on. You're going to try to show them a piece of paper and go through the checkpoint. And the next thing you know, you're going to be in a car chase. You know, a lot of officers, remember, aren't up to speed with a lot of this stuff either.
Not only this, if you're doing what I saw in the video, it could be interpreted as putting up some type of barricade to prevent you from looking at the suspect.
Oh, yeah.
And that's going to make an officer damn nervous.
Oh, yeah. It's right. The last thing you want to see as an officer is hand movement when they're pulling up to a checkpoint. And, you know, and one officer safety thing is, I don't know about you, but at a checkpoint especially, once you receive that information, you step back away from the person. Why are you going to put you know, that's just a safety thing. You step back just enough so you can see them, but if they want to get you, you're out of reach. With those signs, I'm noticing in the videos, the officer literally has to put his head against the window to read it.
You're putting the officer in a ticklish situation, so to speak, and that could invite trouble.
Yeah, and the officer's not going to like that. And, you know, the last thing you want to do is start off on the wrong foot with an officer, because it's like I always say, the officer will win. At least that day, he will win. Well,
and let's also, I want to say this. When I said earlier, you said, what would you have done if it were you? I said, you know, if I saw what looked like could be a valid license registration, send them on the way.
Sure.
You said you wouldn't. You would do more.
Absolutely.
Well, what you're talking about is shattering the window and pulling them out through the window.
Yep.
And, you know,
Absolutely.
It doesn't need to come to this. God forbid, even if you're ripshit drunk, it's survivable.
Yeah.
Don't make something
exactly
a lot worse than it has to be.
Exactly right. Thanks for being a part of the show. I want to remind everybody out there, congratulations to the contest winner. She received a $200, I think it was worth about $200 Cuisinart cooking set. So congratulations to Miss Donna Butterfield. I'm jealous. I wish I had that. I wanted to keep it, but I don't think the sponsors would have been too happy with that. Make sure you visit us at www.policingblackandwhite.com. You can always email us at policingblackandwhite@yahoo.com. Visit our Facebook page